Disengage your four-wheel drive because you're going to want to be able to rotate these axles and get to the bolts. In this video, I'm going to replace both front axles. With the wheel on the ground, take the center cap off and break loose this big axle nut and break loose the lug nuts. So how to tell when your axle is bad, and you'll hear it. It starts with a clicking sound that correlates with the rotation of the wheel. If you ignore it, it progressively gets worse and then turns into a grinding sound and a rubbing sound, again with the rotation of the wheel, and it gets worse while braking and making a turn. There's 2 joints per axle, and you have 2 axles in the front and you probably have 2 axles in the back. Look up under the car and see if any of these boots are ripped or open and exposed. If they are, your axle's definitely bad. But this doesn't tell the whole story. You can have a bad axle and the boots be perfectly fine. Here we see one axle that's bad with the boot ripped wide open. This axle is absolutely shot. And the second axle is bad too, but both boots are perfectly fine. And in the example I'm about to show you, a further test to diagnose whether or not this is your axle. Jack the car up off the wheel and go ahead and turn the wheel and take a close look at the axle. If you take an even closer look, you can see this axle. You can see and hear this axle is positively blown. People hear the word axle and they assume that this is a huge job that calls for a shop and specialty tools. I wouldn't call it simple, but if you've been around a little and you've turned a few wrenches, you can tackle this and save yourself a lot of money. On a 1 to 10 scale, I'd give it about a 6. And once you do it a few times, you can get this job down to a half hour per axle. But if this is your first time, it'll probably take you a few hours per axle. As for a shop, a good mechanic with the right tools can do this in about 10 or 15 minutes per axle. But they're not charging so much for time as they are their experience and their expertise. Grab a lug wrench or a breaker bar or a crowbar or a pipe or anything you can to jam up this front wheel so it doesn't turn when you're taking off this axle nut or the bolts to plug into the differential. Okay. There's a total of 6 of them on the inside. And as you get 3 of them loose, you're going to have to take the crowbar off the wheel and rotate it so you can reach the other 3. You know, as you break this axle loose, you're going to find out that it will not fit through this sway bar link and this shock. And people do all kinds of crazy things to get these axles out. And they'll loosen up the whole sway bar and they'll take out the sway bar link. And they don't have to do any of that. I think that's the hard way. The best thing to do, if you ask me, is just to loosen up the bottom of the shock, pop the shock out of the bottom bracket, and you will have plenty of room to get that axle out. Now, before you do any of that, take some weight off the shock by putting the jack up under the control arm and jacking it up a couple inches just to take the weight off so it'll make it easier to pop this shock off. And then you'll notice the shock will probably extend a little bit. And then when you're done with all this, you can just let the pressure off the control arm. It'll drop down a little bit and the shock should line right back up. Now, there's one more thing you have to do on this side of the truck, and that's to take this skid plate off. It's real easy. It's just 4 bolts, and they're usually not super tight. As you can see, I already got it loose. I have to get one more bolt off and just drop that out of the way. And you only have to take that skid plate off when you're replacing the driver's side axle. We won't have to do this when we're replacing the passenger side. And now you should have plenty of room to pull that axle out of the hub assembly and go ahead and just drop it out of there. Sometimes it takes a little coaxing. I believe this is actually the original axle on this side of the car. And it's always a good idea to compare the new part with the old part just to make sure they sold you the right thing and everything is going to go on just fine. Before I go any further, I'm going to put this skid plate back on. It won't get in the way of anything at this point. Alright, we're gonna fly through the passenger side just in case you missed anything or you just didn't retain something, and just to get it stuck into your head. You can do this, it's easy.